Okay, delegates, please take your seats. My name is Claudia Webb, and I will be chairing for this afternoon. Conference, as you may have gathered, there's been some big news today. So to explain how Conference will respond to this, please welcome back Harry Donaldson, Chair of the CAC.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, I present to you an addendum to CAC 4 with an amended agenda for this afternoon's business. Copies have been provided to delegates as they enter the hall. I am also aware that some early copies have an incorrect date. This has been corrected on later copies. And could I remind all delegates in the hall to remind you to take your seats by 3:50 today for the Leader's speech. The Leader's speech will be heard today at 4 p.m, as I've indicated. Conference will continue as timetabled tomorrow, and CAC 5 tomorrow morning will provide a detailed agenda. We have sought to minimise any changes this afternoon. The CAC hope that Conference understands and accepts this change, and as a result of the ruling this morning, as it's just been indicated by the Chair, Conference will continue tomorrow to ensure that all the important business of Conference is concluded. Please come to the CAC office should there be any queries at all arising from this. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Harry, and thanks to the hard work that the Conference Arrangement Committee and its staff have done to respond so quickly to the situation. Thank you.
He was a mischievous man. He was brilliantly intelligent, a fantastic debater, especially in the House of Commons.
The people know they have lost a friend, someone who was on their side. They know it and they feel it.
I therefore declare that John Smith is elected the leader of the Labour Party.
He is the devalued Prime Minister of a devalued government. The Prime Minister certainly has his work cut out. Much the same as Eddie the Eagle had in attempting to win the gold at the Winter Olympics a few years ago.
When I was ill, they all came round me, and that helped me a great deal. And I also know there are more important things in life than politics, and that's a fundamentally important thing for a politician to know.
That is why the Labour Party's priority is investment. Investment in training, in education, in research, and in regional development.
A lot of the things we celebrate now, I think a number of people have pointed out that it was John who was the first Shadow Chancellor to accept the principle of the national minimum wage.
Now, we know it can be done, and the only question the Tories are asking is, can it be afforded?
There is no other force. There is no other power. There is no other party that can turn this country round. It is up to us, all of us, together. This is our time of opportunity. the time to summon up all our commitment, the time to gather round us all our strength, and united in our common purpose, it is the time to lead our country forward to the great tasks that lie ahead.
And think of the words of John Smith. All I ask, he said, is the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Conference. John Smith paved the way for the Labour governments to follow, and that change that Labour continues to deliver today. Thank you, Conference. Conference, we now come to the international panel, which is one of the highlights of Conference as we get the chance to broaden our vision away from the pressing matters of national policy to look at the life and death struggles of people from around the world. Labour is proud to be an internationalist party, and I'm pleased to report that we have over 200 international visitors to Conference this year. We have visitors from sister parties ranging from Albania to Zimbabwe, and we have diplomatic delegations from embassies and high commissioners in London. You are all very welcome. In particular, I want to welcome the three excellent international speakers we have for you this afternoon. I'm going to introduce each of them in turn before they speak, but the common theme they are going to address can be summed up in just one word: liberation. We know of the incredible struggles that so many peoples went through in order to win their freedom from colonial rule, including freedom from the British Empire. Today's Labour Party salutes those who took part in the national liberation struggles that secured freedom for their peoples, often at terrible personal cost. Yet for many around the world, the fight for national liberation is far from over. And each of our international speakers this afternoon is going to address one aspect of that continuing struggle. Our first speaker is Jaishi Tano from Ghana, who is head of the Political Economy Unit of the Third World Network's African section, and who is going to talk about the continuing struggle for economic liberation being waged today by communities across the global South. Conference, please give a warm welcome to JC. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here, not because I'm in Britain or Brighton, but because of what I heard on the floor of this conference yesterday. The debates, the interventions, the insistence on internationalism not simply being a moral obligation of working class people, of socialists, of the Labour Party, but also as a fundamental requirement of your own liberation from neoliberalism, from austerity here in Britain. And I think that the debates that I listened to yesterday, with delegate after delegate from the community Labour parties and from the grassroots of the party, insisting on the primacy of the unity of working people, is precisely what animates the pleasure and honor of being here, but is also precisely what animates our solidarity together. So when I heard about the interventions on Yemen, on Palestine, on Kashmir, where there has actually been an earthquake today, one of the things that I'm reminded of is that there is no limit to the kind of chaos and destruction that the global system, that neoliberalism, that capitalism can visit on ordinary people, on working people's lives and their conditions anywhere in the world. Of course, it will be no surprise to you at all that in Africa we face the brunt of such depredations. A few months ago, we saw in Mozambique the destruction wrought by Cyclone Idai. We saw an entire city, the city of Beria, razed to the ground. 90% of the city totally destroyed. Grassa Machel described the experience of Beria as the first city that has been destroyed by climate change. And we see the effects of rising temperatures, of erratic rainfall, of violent weather patterns, for example, in the fact that today 2 million people face famine in Somalia. Another 2 million people face famine in Zimbabwe. Hundreds of thousands more are similarly imperiled in places like Malawi. And yet in Malawi, we know how it came to pass that they are in this situation. Because under the aegis of the World Trade Organization, of the IMF, of the British government, yes, Malawians have been forced to privatize agriculture, sell off public food stocks, disinvest in public utilities and services such as the meteorological services, and continue the plunder of their natural resources to pay for debt and so on and so forth. In other words, comrades, what we face is a relentless and unstoppable assault on the conditions of working people everywhere in the world and on the conditions of their livelihoods. Because really, what unites us also is precisely because we are the ones who produce the wealth. We are also the ones whose efforts to ensure social standards and social investments in public services is being taken away from us. So it's not simply about the privatization and the eradication of essential services in places like Malawi. You also have the other thing, the darling project of the British government so far, until a few months' time, or maybe in a few weeks' time, when you put the next government in place, which is the internationalization of PFI on steroids. In the name of public-private partnerships across the length and breadth of Africa, we find that what happened here is being duplicated, is being replicated, multiplied, visited on the most vulnerable populations in the world. And it's not just that. It is also the predatory practices of British and EU and other companies in Africa. So on a daily basis, we see that people are dying from a silent death from urban pollution. One of the biggest killers in Africa. It has overtaken malaria, it has overtaken HIV as the biggest pollution, as the biggest killer in Africa. And why is this so? Because companies like Trafigura, like BP, and so on and so forth, continue to wreck the environment in Africa. And in the process, comrades, there is also a race to the bottom. Beria was destroyed not simply because of the privatization of the port and the unemployment that has been generated in the city. It is because agriculture has collapsed in the countryside. Millions of people are rushing into the cities. There is no infrastructure unless, of course, it's provided by private companies for profit, and so on and so forth. But what we have to understand is that unless we stand up and challenge these things, in the course of the race to the bottom, more and more divisions will be visited upon us. Divisions of race, divisions of gender and sexuality, divisions of religion and faith, ethnic divisions, xenophobic divisions, and so on and so forth. But since we understand that it is us who produce the wealth on which all of this greed and profiteering is based on, we also understand the source of our power. And therefore, when I heard about the fact that an anti-austerity agenda, one that actually unites the working class, ought to be at the front and center of British politics today, over and above everything else. I also heard within that message that workers know how to understand very well how to build their power through unity, through struggle. And that one of the most pernicious effects of neoliberalism, be it in Britain, Barbados, or in Burundi, one of the most pernicious effects is the constant whittling down of the confidence of working people in their own capacity to fight. So we look to the fact that you have put socialism back on the agenda of the Labour Party. We look to the fact that you have built the biggest political movement in Europe in the 21st century. And we take heed from the fact that you will carry the fight into the workplaces, into the communities, into the schools, into the colleges, to ensure that there's a regeneration of economies and so on and so forth. Because that power is central. That power is central. Without that, we end up with a situation where when you buy a cup of coffee for £4, as I did in the hotel yesterday, I'm not complaining, well, I am. Only 1 pence of that goes back to coffee farmers in Africa. Why is it so? Why is it so? It is so for the same reason, the very same reason, why rural small beef farmers in Ireland are fighting back, not simply against the EU and its common agricultural policy, which favors big farmers over small farmers, but against the meat processors and against the supermarket chains. In Ireland, and I'm using this example so that it's closer to home, in Ireland what we see is that when a farmer earns €2 from out of every 10 euro, the supermarkets earn €5, the processors earn €3. Now think about what that means in the global coffee chains, in the global cocoa chains, in the global minerals and gold and so on and so forth. And unless we address this question of property rights, who owns what, who controls production, and so on and so forth, we will end up, even with our global new climate deal, with the same inequality where one part of the globe, there's a concentration of intellectual property rights, there's a concentration of technological know-how, and others are and others are denied. So comrades, I'm not here to tell a story of poverty in Africa. We know that exists. What I'm here to talk about is the possibility and the necessity, the urgency of a fight back. And what I want to talk about is the fact that you must carry that fight here in Britain for us to see the examples of how these things work. And we understand that your confrontation against PFI will weaken it in the international order as well. We understand that your confrontation against bad food will weaken the kind of agenda that the EU is imposing, not simply on people in Latin America through the EU-Mercosur deal, but through free trade agreements in places like Africa as well. We understand that there are rival internationalisms. And internationalism does not mean I have to sign up to the agenda of the IMF, of the World Bank, or of the EU, or when you look at the EU. So we look above all. We look above all to the fact that you are a highly skilled organization and a highly capable movement which can take advantage and deepen in every democratic space that is available, be it in Parliament, be it in the Supreme Court, and so on and so forth. But above all, comrades, our power rests with us. Our power rests in our workplaces, in our communities, in our colleges. Our power works on the fact that we can build independent political movements that can lead the unification of people no matter what their race, their color, whichever part of the world in which they live. So our challenge to you, comrades, build the working class movement, build working class power, build unity, build your independence, and that's how we get closer to a genuine internationalism and a genuine socialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JC. That was powerful. Our next speaker represents a people still fighting for their national liberation over 40 years since the departure of the ruling European power. That people is the people of Western Sahara. Conference, I'm proud to introduce Khadija, an activist from Western Sahara who has represented her people's case before the European Parliament and the United Nations, and who has travelled here today to call for our solidarity as well. Please give a warm welcome to Khadija. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Wow, you cannot imagine, and I don't know how to tell you how proud I feel today for being able to speak to you, Labour Party, to you, the future of Britain, to you, the people who are going to change things for all of us, and tell you about my country and try to seek for your help for this purpose. When I was little, my dad used to sing a song to me which said something like, Thora Zina. Thora Zina in Arabic speaks about revolution, and not just revolution, about the beauty of revolution, about how beautiful revolution can be. Those are the type of songs that I heard when I was little. So I can say that I'm the daughter of our revolution. I am the daughter of the Sahrawi revolution. I come from the last colony in Africa. I come from Western Sahara. These couple of days here have been enough to see that, unfortunately, our country is not very known by most of the people here. So I'm going to take advantage to not let you know about that. Western Sahara is, and I repeat, is a Spanish colony because, according to the United Nations, it's a decolonization process. So we have a very big problem of Spain being still responsible for us. But that's not our only problem. We were invaded by Morocco, allowed by Spain in this case. So we are still a colony which is invaded by a very brutal and oppressive force, which is Morocco. When the invasion happened, mid-70s, some of our people were able to flee to the Algerian territory. So if there are any Algerians here, thank you once and every day for handing and giving us your hand and your land to leave. So we were able to settle our refugee camps in the Algerian territory, and that is where I lived most of my teenagerhood. I happened to have the possibility to travel to Europe afterwards, study there, work there, and be here today with us after learning English in Liverpool and speak to you in English. And tell you about our struggle, okay, and let you know. As I told you, I grew up in the Sahrawi refugee camps. As my comrade African said, in our case, in the refugee camps, we didn't have any material things, but we were brought up in the revolution. We were brought up holding and embracing our dreams and hopes for our freedom, the pride, the dignity, and the will to be fighting. So that's why people, when they meet any of us Sahrawi people, they're usually shocked to see, because we can speak in the name of our country and we take any single chance to do that. So we had to organize a country in the middle of nowhere, in the desert, yeah, with the leading of the Polisario Front. And I have to say that if a war has anything positive in our case, is the fact that, as we are a very small community, women had to take a very active role. So women had to build the hospitals, women had to organize educational system, the health system, and absolutely, as well as take the arms to defend ourselves as well. On the other hand, we cannot forget that part of our society stayed in the occupied territories. The situation in the occupied territories under the Moroccan oppression is totally different. There is absolutely no speech freedom. There is no possibility of respecting any human rights or anything like that. Your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, had the possibility in 2014 to visit our occupied territories, and he could see Although you can imagine, as having him visiting there, a lot of things were hidden and kept secret, of course, but still he could see something as simple as taking a picture and not being able to have that picture because they were all deleted, so that that information could not be taken here and show it to the whole world, and see how Morocco constantly violates all our rights, detains our people, makes people disappear, tortures, and so on and so forth. In the last, I now have the possibility, not many Sahrawi people do unfortunately, but I do, to go to the occupied territories. And the fact of not being able to speak my mind, as I'm doing now in front of you, it's just totally heartbreaking. I have the possibility to speak to several activists there who have been disappeared for years, yeah? Who have been raped constantly, whose houses have been put apart, whose families are destroyed because they've got different members of the family suffering all these issues once and again. Again, in the occupied territories, our women have and are constantly organizing a peaceful resistance to this and trying to go for that liberation in a peaceful way, although it's deeply difficult, as you can imagine. For example, we managed to organize a home, a house, a building to be able to meet there and speak in our language in Hassaniya, speak about problems, train our women in order to be able to be prepared and qualified to fight for these. And the Moroccan government forced the person, the landlady of that house, to stop that renting by blackmailing her, telling her, if you continue renting that house, we're going to kill you, we're going to do this to your children, you can imagine the rest of the story, I think. So last July, there was an African football cup, okay? And to imagine the oppression that we're suffering constantly in the streets of El Ayoun, our capital, the police ended up killing one girl, running over her, just because they were trying to stop the people from celebrating the victory of Algeria in the African Football Cup. So that is a very tiny little example. So as I'm hearing here, and as I've heard your original leader, John Smith, and as I know the feeling of many of you, you're an internationalist party, isn't it? Yeah? So, we guys need you, in this case, we need you to call for the United Nations Security Council to set a date for a free and fair referendum for self-determination for Western Sahara. We need you for that. We need you also to find some kind of independent observatory to be able to go to the occupied territories and then report what the Moroccan police army government is doing to our people every single day of the year. We need you to be with us, and I want to take the advantage to call to that passion, to that blood inside you, to be with us, to stand with us, because I think that you are here for the same thing as me. You're finding justice, you want to fight for your rights, you have your own revolution, so please take your revolution, get in charge of everything, and then please stand with us and help us be independent as well. And to finish, basically, that's it. We need you, we need every single person in this room and the people who are listening to us worldwide too, to stand with us, to remember where Western Sahara is, not to forget it. I know there are a lot of conflicts all over the world, but please, we do need to give an end to this after 45 years of conflict. We want to go back home, we want to reunite our families, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Solidarity. Our final speaker is another tireless advocate for his people's right to freedom. Louis-Olivier Brancot, the leader of the Chagas refugee group, who will tell us how a Labour government under Jeremy Corbyn can make an immediate difference in delivering justice to the Jagosian people. Please, conference, please give a warm welcome to Olivia.
Respected leader of the UK Labour Party, Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, delegates and members of Labour Party. It's a great privilege for me to be the first Sagosian to address a major British party conference. On behalf of all displaced Sagosians, we send you all our fraternal greeting. And I thank you for giving me this unique and memorable opportunity to share with you our suffering and denying of our basic human rights. Some of our people living among you in Crawley and Manchester, many live in Mauritius, others in Seychelles. But none of our people live in our homeland in Chagos Archipelago. We have become exiled in the most inhuman manner, and our story of exile is started with a Labour government under Howard Wilson in 1965. Prior to that, we Sagosian people were living in a simple and peaceful, happy life in Chagos Archipelago. In the early 1960s, the UK and the US began secret negotiations to establish a joint military nuclear base on the main island of Diego Garcia, which in 1965 resulted in the UK government detaching the Chagos Island from the territories of colonies of Mauritius, an act that was again United Nations resolution on decolonization. The Americans wanted the island to be sanitized, and that is, there should not be any Sagosian living on this island. Sadly, the United Kingdom, a great defender of human rights and justice, simply obeyed to the demand of the US. First, they gassed all our dogs. And then between 1971 and up to 1973, Sagosians were herded like cattle and forcibly deported from our birthplace in the most inhuman way to Seychelles and Mauritius, where life of a huge poverty was waiting for us. Even up to date, families were split and remain split between the Seychelles, Mauritius, and UK. What could a small, peaceful community do when two superpowers of the time conspire to deny us of our basic human right? But in the late 1990s, as leader of the Sagosian people, and inspired by a group of Sagosian women like Salija Alexi, Lisette Talat, and my own mom, Rita Bancoul, decided proceeding action in British court against the British government, because we want to declare that what had been done to us is unlawful. In 2000, we did achieve partial success in the High Court, and Robin Cook, to his great credit, began process of planning the resettlement the outer island, but not Diego Garcia. But that hope did not last, as the government raised any number of reasons to block progress, international security after 9/11, marine conservation, cost of taxpayers, etc. We contest all this successful in the court, but finally the House of Lords, now the Supreme Court, decided in favor of the government by a slim margin of 3 to 2. Now Mauritius, with our support, has taken the matter into the International Court of Justice and the United Nations General Assembly. We have had great support for all over the world, the Commonwealth, the African Union, members of European Union, non-aligned movement. On the 25th of February this year, the International Court of Justice, in a legal opinion, ruled that UK was wrong to exercise the Sagos Islanders and to deport Sagosian from their birthplace. On the 22nd of May this year, the United Nations Assembly, by a large majority, voted a resolution urging the United Kingdom government to respect the advisory opinion of the ICJ and to restore the Sagos Islanders to Mauritius, which will allow the Sagosian to return immediately to their birthplace. The Mauritian government is committed to helping with funds to facilitate resettlement of Sagosian, and I can ask you that a future visit is being organized for the near future for we as Sagosian to be able to go on our birthplace. The Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, who understands our case as well as anyone in the UK, will accept the General Assembly verdict. So will the Liberal Democrat. So will the Scottish National Party. So will the Green Party accept to do the same as Jeremy Corbyn. The UN General Assembly has since then set a deadline of 22nd of November for the implementation of the ICJ ruling. By contrast, on the 1st May of this year, Jeremy Corbyn wrote to Theresa May, which was published in the Guardian newspaper, condemning Theresa May's defiance of ICJ and United Nations General Assembly resolution in the Guardian letter. The Labour Party stated their support to the rules of law, both at home and abroad, and also is fully committed to respect the advisory opinion, and full so as to ensure that Sagosian are able to return to their home. I salute Jeremy Corbyn for holding his position. For nearly 20 years, the British government has opposed resettlement of Sagosian, despite the fact that the feasibility studies done by KPMG in 2015 found that resettlement was both feasible and practical. In 2016, November, UK government, in a written statement, had proposed a support package of £40 million sterling to improve the condition and quality life of every Sagosian wherever they may be live, but up to now, nothing had been done. 3 years later, the promise remained hollow except for a few visits. Our human rights and dignity cannot be replaced by visits. We want to be on our birthplace as all human beings. I often wonder if our treatment would have been different if Sagosian had the same profile as Falklanders. After many years, Sagosian are living They are still facing day-to-day difficulties, from housing, social problem, financial hardship, reunification of separated families due to hostile immigration policies. I and our supporters around the world fail to understand why the UK government has for so long opposed resettlement. It is we know that more than 3,000 people, workers from Filipino, Sri Lanka, Singaporean, are allowed to work on Diego, whereas some are allowed to live on Paros Bandos and Salomon, whereas we as Sagosian, we are not allowed to live on our birthplace. During a recent visit to Mauritius, His Holiness Pope Francis stated his unconditional support for the Sagosian people. He told international journalists, and I quote, "When we recognize international organizations such as the ICJ in The Hague and at the UN and give them the capacity to judge internationally, when they speak, if we are part of humanity, we must obey. What we want UK government to respect the fundamental right and the dignity of our people." I would like to thank thousands of ordinary British people who have been supporting us. It is high time now, once and for all, to put an end of our suffering and denying us of basic human rights. In the beginning of my speech, I mentioned the nightmare of the peaceful Sagosian started by a Labour government. Now, after listening to Emily Thornberry yesterday, when she debates, I now confirm, believe it will be a Labour government. The next British government with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister that will be finally put an end to our nightmare and support our right of return and duly compensate my people. I thank you for your attention and want you to support my people in order to be able to return back to our homeland. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. That was tremendous. Conference. This closes the international panel. And I would like to thank all of our three speakers who have spoken so powerfully, so passionately to us here this afternoon. You can be sure of our support in your struggles for national, economic and political liberation. A Labour government under Jeremy Corbyn will stand in solidarity with the oppressed against the oppressor, wherever they may be in the world. Thank you. Conference. We're going to move straight to our first debate, housing, local government and transport. We are running, of course, a little behind schedule, but we're going to get through as much business as possible before, of course, 4 p.m. when, of course, we will hear from Jeremy Corbyn himself. Conference, we start the debate with reference back. The following CLPs have notified us of references back. Brighton Pavilion, Hackney North and Stoke Newington CLP, Labour International and Tottenham. Does anyone else wish to move reference back? So because references back we'll take from the floor as well. But if I can... Okay,
just call and get them.
Okay, come. Don't we need to take the references back?
Yeah, we do. Doesn't matter.
Okay, so if we take the references back now, remember, conference, the details of the references back in advance are in your conference CAC Pack 4. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Teresa Mackey, a first-time delegate, first-time speaker, Brighton Pavilion, CLP. We welcome this is page 111 of the MPF report. We welcome the acknowledgement in the report of the vital role of appropriate staffing levels to secure the safety of all people on trains and at stations. We're referencing back the word on board to make explicit the key assistance needed from station staff to enable disabled people to access stations, buy tickets and get information and so on. Guards on trains are vital, but disabled people need to access those stations in order to use those trains. Again, I refer to page 111 in the MPF report. There is no mention anywhere in the report of bus passes for disabled people. People with disabilities have suffered the cruelty of a sustained assault on their security by the Tory government. We fully support pensioners' bus passes, but are referencing back on the word pensioners to urge the Commission to confirm Labour's commitment to provide free bus passes to various groups, including disabled people, pensioners and young people, in order to promote their independence and reduce social isolation. Thank you.
Hi, Conference. Claire Wadey, Brighton Pavilion, and I'm covering our other 4 references back in this section. First of all, page 103, paragraph 2, and page 108, paragraph 3, which you'll find on pages 23 to 24 of your CAC report. It's basically the same reference back. We're not seeking to underplay the deprivation and suffering under the Tories and their dreadful austerity all over the country. But as Len McCluskey, my union leader, said yesterday, fundamentally, inequality is class-based. And as Labour, we're the party seeking to transform Britain in the interest of the 99%. The divide in this country is between the haves and the have-nots. It's between the 1% and us in the 99%. It is not based on geography, and we shouldn't be adopting language of the Tories, language which divides us. The Forum report, in its conclusion on page 109, has it right. Labour is the party seeking to transform Britain in the interests of the have-nots, and we'd like the Forum report to emphasise that, which is why we've made these references back to the emphasis on geography. Moving on to the second one, page 101 to 102, Parliament has got to be fully representative of all sections of the community, and we'd like the Forum report to cover all underrepresented groups, not just a couple of them. There's no mention of trans groups or other groups like disabled people. And finally, our final reference back on page 110, page 26 of the CAC report refers to social housing and genuinely affordable housing, and it refers to affordable homes, and it refers to affordable house building. There's a lot of confusion around what we would refer to as so-called affordable housing. The government, the Tory government, defines affordable housing as 80% of the market rate. That is not affordable. Brighton has the least affordable housing in the country. For 20-year-olds, people in their 20s, it is less affordable than even in London for private renters. We should never confuse our party policy by using the language of the Tories. Our party documents must refer to social housing or council housing and should never use the phrase affordable housing. Thank you.
Brighton Pavilion. Next. Okay, next delegate. CLP.
Nathan Crichton, in the North and Central England CLP. I'm referencing back a paragraph on Labour's house building policy, page 110. It was only commitment in the NPF was 1 million houses in the next 10 years. Given the crucial nature of housing and the risk of not being re-elected, I would suggest a concrete commitment for the next 5 years, as per the 2017 manifesto pledge, to build 100,000 houses per year in 5 years. So many people across our country are pinning their hope for improved housing on Labour, and we cannot afford to let them down.
Pat Byrne, Labour International, moving reference back on the section of the MPF report that outlines our target for council home building. The comrade before has made the correct point about the target is for 10 years, but it should be for 5 years. Let's remember, comrades, that 50,000 a year, which is our 50,000 council homes a year, which is our current target, is woefully inadequate. It cannot make a serious dent in the housing crisis. And let's remember that in the 1950s, when we were suffering from a bankrupt country after the Second World War, we were building 250,000 council homes a year. Conference, we've got excellent motions coming up now in the composite on housing, which are double this target. However, if we pass this MPF report, we've got conflicting targets, and that would be a wrong thing to do. I think that what we have to do is refer back this report, support our motions in the composite. The last point I'd like to make is that let's, in the housing motion, housing composite, let's have a card vote so we get a 2/3 majority so it goes into our manifesto.
Not quite reference back.
Thank you.
But thank you. Okay, next delegate. Is this Tottenham? Great.
Noah Tucker, Tottenham CLP. The main problem with affordable housing, and the reason we don't need millions of affordable homes, is that people can't afford them. That target of building millions of homes needs to be a target of building council homes on target rents and secure tenancies. But comrades, someone in the NPF seems to have forgotten our policy, or perhaps they were asleep during conference 2017 and 2018, because this is already Labour Party policy. Why isn't it in the report? And who's going to be building those homes? It should not be private developers exploiting workers in non-unionised, dangerous conditions with no pensions or poor pensions. It needs to be direct labour organisations with full trade union representation.
Thank you.
Employed by local authorities on the state with good pay, good conditions and a good pension at the end of the day. This is about quality jobs as well as quality homes. Comrades, I move reference back.
Thank you, Tottenham. Our next delegate, and just so that we're clear, if you can tell us which part of the policy document you're referencing back.
Yes, Steve Garrick, Ruislip, Walford and Pinner, proud GMB. Speaking to 103 to 104 and the final section, last two paragraphs of page 110. Comrades, it's not good enough for councils we control to just change local economics for community wealth building. It's also important for the councillors on the councils that we do not control to make the change of minds, but not only policy too, but to make the parties controlling to be seen for what they are. especially those who think that outsourcing and ignoring local jobs is acceptable. Creating circular wealth is to be gratefully received as a groundbreaking policy, and this is what we do best. We should expect our councillors, though, who are in non-controlling councils, to actually do the job that we put them in to do, and to respect those in the community they're expected to work on behalf of. There are far too many vanity councillors out there who don't do the job that they should be doing. Unless we hold our councillors to a higher standard, we fail the citizens. I just want to talk about community transport.
You've only got 1 minute, but you've finished.
It's my second paragraph.
1 second.
Okay. Via Van and Uber are trying to get into community transport. Allowing gig economy companies who pay gig economy rates without any safeguards should not be allowed. We need to refer this motion.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, on reference back, we have 1 minute. And if you just say which part of the document you're referencing back and introduce yourself.
David Black, Rayleigh and Wickford, CLP. The sections I want to refer back are on page 110, the first 2 paragraphs, other issues. Comrades, council housing is not another issue. Council housing is the single most important thing, I think, even above the NHS, that the 1945 government concentrated on. Because it improved the health of our nation, it removed TB, it took children and families out of poverty, and it gave security in secure council homes built to Parker Morris standards. What I would like to say in referring this back is that we need to repeal the Tory discriminatory housing acts, especially the Housing Act 1988. We need to get rid of all these measures like assured tenants, short-hold tenancies, and so on, and restore secure tenancies both to council tenants who remain council tenants that actually are secure tenants, but those that were transferred by the snake oil merchants under the large-scale transfers of council housing to puppet housing associations don't retain that, even though they were promised contractually that they would. Sanctuary Housing Association, where I come from, is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the council tenants that transferred. They don't get given those rights they were promised. So, in summing up, affordable housing doesn't exist unless it's council housing. We need to build more houses just like the government in 1945.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just whilst our next delegate is coming up, can I just remind people that for those who are trying to use the hearing loops, if you can not chatter amongst yourself, because it makes it very, very difficult for those people. So if I can ask you to just not chat amongst yourself. Delegate, you've got 1 minute. If you introduce yourself and which aspect you're referencing back.
Okay, Mike Martin, Erewash CLP, which is in Derbyshire. In the entire national policy document, there's one reference to HS2 on page 111, people's access to transport services. HS2 is not some undeniable good for the country. Electrification of the East Coast Main Line nationally has been sacrificed to the altar of HS2. And in my town, Long Eaton, it's going to cut cut the town in half, basically, under the current plans. Every single decision they've made, they've gone into the heart of our country rather than the countryside. And the other thing is, we talked about the environment this morning, and it's going to annihilate Long Eaton's carbon footprint. We're losing rail services because they're building HS2, which is going to mean that people have to get into their cars to drive to Toton, interchange, adding to all that sort of stuff. So please reconsider the views towards HS2. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have just one more reference back in this section.
Conference. Rex Henry, St Ives Constituency Labour Party. I'm moving reference back on section 1, paragraph 1, section on page 101. Let's get my glasses in place. We have no policy in this document on second homes. It's a particular problem for us in Cornwall. We have in the region of 25,000 second homes in our constituency, 10% of the total housing provision, largely left empty throughout the year, 6,000 of which avoid council tax and business rates. In an area which qualifies as one of Europe's most deprived, we definitely and definitively need a social housing, and the £11 million avoided by second homes could help fund this. We have been promised this by members of the Cabinet. We are pleased that they have done so, but we would like to see this in our policy documents and general election document. No reference should be made that endorses the Tory notion of affordable housing. It's neither affordable nor fit for purpose, built as it is for profit and not for people. We need a socialist alternative to this fake housing provision. We should definitively return to council social housing homes. This should be with council in-house building and architects departments. Remember those? We need to provide not only the numbers, but well-designed, spacious, comfortable homes fit for families, well-engineered, low-energy, low-carbon housing. I commend this to conference.
Thank you.
There's lots and lots of charter.
Okay, conference, that brings us to the end of our reference back. But could I just say again, there are people who are trying to use the hearing loops, so please can we not chatter amongst ourselves, because it becomes very difficult for those people. We now, conference, move to our motions. If you are forwarding or seconding a motion, please make your way to the delegate desk so you are ready to be called. The first motion I'm calling is Composite 21, Local Authority Cuts, moved by Hornsey and Wood Green CLP, seconded by Tottenham CLP. And whilst the mover and seconder comes forward, could I ask for Composite 19 to also be ready on homelessness, moved by Community and seconded by East Worthing and Shoreham CLP. You have 3 minutes to move the motion.
Mark Blake, Hornsey Wood Green CLP, Haringey Councillor. Comrades, I'm delighted to be proposing our motion on the corrosive impact of Tory cuts on local government. Tory Lib Dem austerity was meant to save money and repair the economy. But the perverse reality has been that the false economies of austerity can be seen in all of the services delivered by local authorities in every corner of the country. Austerity has increased costs, divisions and hurt. In adult social care, a failure to invest in decent support for our elderly and most vulnerable citizens has led to falling levels of care, increased low-wage privatisation and resulted in further pressures on the NHS through bed blocking. In housing, we see the absurdity of councils spending millions on housing homeless families in private sector temporary accommodation that too often doesn't meet accepted standards, while subsidising private landlords, when any responsible government should be investing in high-quality council homes, creating jobs and giving families a better start in life that comes from a secure place to call home. But it's in my position in Haringey as Cabinet Member for Communities, Engagement and Young People where I've seen close up the awful consequences of austerity on the young people of Haringey. My role has been dominated by the rise of violence and its impact on our children in Haringey. Across the road from our council offices in Wood Green has been a murder scene of 3 young people in our borough in the last 18 months. The issues are complex, but the collective trauma this is creating and the damage being inflicted on our communities and children is immeasurable. A lot of the national debate has focused on the impact of police cuts and the rise of serious youth violence. But the Tories and Lib Dems' willful, shameful destruction of council-run services for our most vulnerable children and families has been a huge contributor. Children's services have endured more than 30% cuts since 2010. The cuts to early years services, special education needs support and most pertinently youth services, which have been devastated by 40% cuts over the past 9 years, have been a critical factor in a crisis of serious violence. Only the deluded Tories can argue that knife crime is not linked to austerity. Conference, I'm proud that Haringey is reversing the years of disinvestment in youth services while still faced with further cuts in government funding, and that we have placed improving the outcomes for our most vulnerable children at the heart of our public health approach to addressing serious youth violence. Local government at its best is part of the glue that binds our communities together. But Haringey and all local authorities need national leadership and more resources. We know only a Jeremy Corbyn-led government will deliver that. And finally, conference, briefly, finally, it's my birthday today. And I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. And like many of my generation, Thatcher cast a huge shadow over my life. The next election is bigger than 79. For the sake of our children, we must unite and win. Please support this motion.
I'll allow that impromptu birthday celebration. Tottenham.
Oh, thanks. That was nice. Marta García de la Vega, first-time delegate from Tottenham CLP. In Haringey, we changed the previous right-wing Labour leadership. They were vigorously privatising and carrying out devastating cuts, including closing our day centres. Now, with people like Mark Blake in the Haringey cabinet, we will reopen those day centres and we will put home care workers on the London living wage. But the main problem is nearly 10 years of Lib Dem and Conservative government who cut our budget every single year. Comrades, I am the proud mother of a disabled child, and we have personally felt the huge impact of austerity on therapies, on education, on school transport. I could go on. But also, I'm a campaigner fighting for the rights of disabled children. We are not just passive receivers of declining services. We must be active in fighting and designing our services. The solution is to get Jeremy Corbyn as our Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Tottenham.
For that, it's not enough knock on people's door asking for their vote. We need to be organizing and involving people fighting against the cuts nationally and in the communities where we live.
Thank you, Tottenham.
That is the way to make Jeremy Corbyn our Prime Minister and reverse austerity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I ask for the movers and seconders of Composite 19, just remind us all when making our powerful points, let's be respectful of the whole of our Labour family. So please be respectful. Composite 19.
Conference, Andrew Guttridge Community Union, a proud steel worker and a proud army veteran. Conference, under this Tory government, the number of people sleeping rough on these streets has increased by 165%. And of that, homeless population, more than approximately 6,000 armed forces veterans are homeless. Men and women who risk their lives for this country are being let down and failed by their own government. Imagine coming back from a war and finding the country you were risking your life for has turned its back on you. Services decimated and nowhere to turn. You end up on the street with no place to call home and no one seems to care. Conference, it is our responsibility to care, because fighting for the vulnerable has always been one of the central tendencies of this party, and it's one way we live by. And it's not just about veterans like me. You just have to walk down any street in the country. In fact, just walk around the streets of Brighton to get yourselves here today, you will have begun to understand the scale of the problem. But that's just the visible homelessness. What about the couch surfing or the trapped staying in hostels for years? Every person who needs one, and a country where people really care. My own union, launched a campaign to tackle homelessness this year. We made a real commitment to stand up and be counted, and to do something that would make a difference. And that's why I'm here today, on behalf of my union, calling on the Labour Party to have a strong, radical approach to this crisis, properly support our veteran community and renew its commitment to stand with our ex-service personnel, and commit to making 100 million available to councils in year one, along to provide additional support to the homelessness. Conference, this is a social crisis, but the Labour Party, as long as proud to see it working together to find a solution to difficult challenges. To solve this crisis, we must do so again. Conference, I move.
Thank you. And just before we second that one, could I just ask the mover and seconder of Composite 23, housing, and also be ready for the emergency motion as well. Go ahead, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, Conference. Councillor Deb Stainforth here, East Worthing and Shoreham CLP. Thanks. First time at conference, first time delegate, first time speaker. Thank you. And speaking to the composite homeless motion, number 19, page 17, Conference, we are living now in a time where the sight of people sleeping rough is becoming normal. People who find themselves homeless are dehumanised, attacked and even murdered. Conference, when a homeless man dies in the shadows of the House of Commons and people walk on by, then it's time to say enough is enough. We need to do what we as a Labour Party are here for, to fight for social justice, to make sure homeless people have the rights the rest of us take for granted. 30 years of neoliberal capitalism and a decade of Tory austerity have left a wretched legacy across our country, criminalising our most vulnerable. And no more so than the people who have been stripped of the dignity of having a roof over their head. People living on the streets in increasing numbers, sleeping on sofas or surviving in emergency accommodation continue to pay the most brutal price for the way this government has stacked the system so that the rich get richer and the poor hit rock bottom. Look around you, Conference. Look at the people in this room here today. You are here because you know that we need to change our country and because you know that only Labour can do this. This Homeless Bill of Rights is our opportunity to do just that. It's a set of standards, a high promise to the homeless that they will be treated with respect and as human beings. It upholds the equality and dignity of homeless people and makes their rights real and substantial. We have a chance to change the conversation about homelessness, to say enough is enough, to say we no longer accept that anyone has to sleep on the street. Conference, while the rich dine away at the Grand, 20 people have died on the streets of Brighton this year alone. 20 people. Our homeless community needs us now. They need transformative, socialist Labour policies because...
Thank you.
Socialism... I've got 2 more lines or so. Socialism is how we deliver houses, how we deliver rights, and how we deliver dignity. Conference, we need a Homeless Bill of Rights to make sure that the sight of anyone sleeping rough is once again shocking to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just before we move and second Composite 23, just a small update. We are going to continue to move and second on the motions and open it up for speeches, but we'll be finishing now at 4:15 and preparing ourselves for 4:30 when Jeremy Corbyn will address conference. So, Composite 23. Three minutes.
Thank you. Kate Ewart, Chair of South East Cornwall CLP. Second time delegate, first time speaker. I'm here to talk about Housing Composite 23. I live in Cornwall, and my family and I were evicted from our privately rented home 2 years ago.
Just hold on one moment, Delegate. Could I just ask people to not chatter again, just for the hit? Okay, just the people who are trying to hear from the hearing loops. So, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. My family and I were evicted from our privately rented home 2 years ago due to no fault of our own. We were put on the housing list as a priority due to our son having a chronic, lifelong health condition. We were told there was no housing available and we would be put in a B&B for up to 18 months, 50 miles away from our community, 50 miles away from our support network. We couldn't take that risk to our son's physical health, nor to my mental health. We had to get our family into considerable debt and privately rent one of the very few family houses that was available, which of course took us off the council housing list. Our home is far from secure. We live with the constant threat of eviction. Like so many others, probably so many here in this room, this threat hangs over us constantly. We now live in an ex-council house. We pay £800 a month in rent, which is nearly 2/3 of our income. Like so many others, we get housing benefit support. Around £23 billion a year is paid in housing benefit, and about £9 billion of that goes to private landlords. 40% of ex-council houses, like ours, are in the private rental sector. We can and we must change this. Comrades, we are in a deep housing crisis in this country. We have far too many families living in insecure housing, not enough family homes, and a horrific lack of genuinely affordable council housing. Conference, we can change that. We have particular and specific housing crisis in Cornwall, caused by a large amount of second homes and holiday lets, higher than average rents and house prices, and much lower than average wages, compounded by insecure work, 0 hours contracts, and seasonal work. Conference, please, I beg you, help end this housing crisis. Help make insecure housing a thing of the past. Support our motion for a radical transformation in housing across the entire country, including building an average of 155,000 social rented homes per year, of which 100,000 will be social rented council houses. At least 10 billion a year ring-fenced for council housing, and ending, not suspending, right to buy. Thank you, Conference. I move.
Thank you. Kate Dove, Young Labour National Committee North Representative, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. Conference. We all know there is a housing crisis in Britain. It's an issue that affects over 8 million people every single day. From young people unable to pay their rent to families left in limbo for years on housing waiting lists. And we don't have to go very far to see it for ourselves. A report published last year said that Brighton has the second highest rate of homelessness in the country. Conference, a moral society does not allow people to die on the streets. This is a situation that's been cooked up by the Tories in Whitehall. In the past 9 years, they've rattled our country with austerity, selling off council homes, starving councils of funds, tearing up regulations. Conference, a crisis created by the market cannot be solved by the market. It will fall to us, in a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn, to step in where the market has failed and use the powers of the state to solve a crisis caused by the right-wing, right-to-buy ideology of Thatcher and her Tory successors. Although our 2017 manifesto was a step in the right direction, Young Labour believes we need to go much, much further. We need to fight for a future where housing is a basic human right. So, Conference, we call on the next Labour government to legislate for open-ended tenancies, give councils the power to requisition empty homes, particularly in coalfield communities, as highlighted by the Coalfield Regeneration Trust. Take housing associations under council control. build council homes to the best environmental standards as part of a Green New Deal, and importantly, cap rents at rates linked to local incomes. Conference, this motion makes it clear that the housing crisis cannot be solved by the private sector. Either we pursue a housing policy based on investor speculation, or we accept that housing is a human right and policy should be focused on housing people based on need. Conference, housing gives people security. An insecure working class is with a working class in chains. So let's get back to representing our class. I urge you to support this motion for a radical socialist housing policy for the many, not the few. Thank you.
Now, Conference, we have an emergency motion on Kashmir moved by Leighton and Wanstead CLP.
Hello, Conference. My name is Uzma Rasul and I'm from Leighton and Wanstead CLP. Yesterday, I submitted this emergency motion to talk about the crisis in Kashmir at the moment. Today marks the 51st day of the Kashmir siege. It has been 51 days since the communications blackout and since the extra deployment of Indian troops in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Since the deployment of troops and since the blackout, there has been an exasperation of human rights abuses, of illegal detentions, including the detention of children, and there has been a great decline in the peace of the region. The Indian government claims that there is normalcy in Kashmir. However, there is nothing normal about hospitals lacking the basic medicines and supplies to treat its patients. There's nothing normal about cancer patients not being able to access care. There's nothing normal about people not being able to contact their families. Today we have learned that there has been an earthquake in the Kashmir region, in Pakistan-administered Kashmir and Indian-occupied Kashmir. Now, I have family in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. I have been able to check on them. I've been able to phone and ask how they are. However, Indian Kashmiri diaspora have not been able to contact their families and ask how they are. We must urgently request that India opens access for the Kashmir region so that humanitarian aid agencies can go in and provide help. This is now a major crisis, and we must act on it. What I'd also like to point out is the Kashmir crisis is not new. This is a 72-year struggle for the Kashmiri people, 72 years of human rights violations, of gang rapes and mass rapes state-endorsed by armed forces. This is 72 years of mass blinding, of pellet gun injuries on protesters, of journalists being blocked, of being imprisoned, of journalistic freedom being restricted. We cannot allow another 30 years, we cannot allow a century of oppression to take place. We must act now. For the Kashmiri people have struggled for 72 years, and they have endured the worst pain while the world has looked on. For long we have said that Kashmir is a bilateral issue. For long we have relied on India and Pakistan to talk and fix things between themselves, but we cannot do that no longer. It has reached breaking point, it has reached crisis point, and the Kashmiri people need intervention, they need help, and they need their voices heard. They need the international community to step in, to empower their voices, and for us to listen to them. We need representation on the UN Council. Overall, Kashmiri people need to be empowered, especially in this time of crisis, and it's urgent that we open up access in Kashmir so that international observers and charities can get in this time of crisis, especially as there has been a natural disaster today. So I urge you, as a party committed to social justice, as an internationalist party, to please support the Kashmiri people, to stand in solidarity, and to listen to their voices. Thank you.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Conference, Councillor Nigat Khan, Nottingham East CLP. In 1947, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution asking for a referendum to be held to allow the people of Kashmir to determine their own future. But instead, Kashmir is one of the most heavily militarized regions in the world. The Kashmiri people, who for 72 years have been locked in a cycle of violence and fear, need an end to this suffering. They need a solution which protects their human rights and respects their rights to determine their own future. As Jeremy Corbyn said, the situation in Kashmir is deeply disturbing. Human rights abuses taking place are unacceptable. The rights of the Kashmiri people must be respected and UN resolutions implemented. Only peaceful dialogue between India and Pakistan can stop another generation of children in Kashmir growing up entrapped in a cycle of violence. Conference, we ask our Labour Party is represented at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to demand the restoration of basic human rights, including freedom of speech and communication. Accept that Kashmir is a disputed territory and people of Kashmir should be given the right of self-determination in accordance with the UN resolution. Conference, we want our Labour Party to stand with the Kashmiri people fighting against occupation, fighting against injustice. This is vital as we stand for social justice and ethical foreign policy. Like my colleague earlier said, we've been made aware that early this afternoon, a 5.8 magnitude earthquake has struck Kashmir, so the people of Kashmir suffer more. Our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Kashmir, but I have been contacted by families in Nottingham East who are concerned that they are unfortunately unable to get contact with people in Kashmir, the Pakistani administered Kashmir and also the Indian Kashmir. So I hope you will show solidarity with the people of Kashmir and support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, conference, we've had some very important motions put forward. We need to open up a debate, but I want you to bear with us because this debate will need to continue tomorrow. But for today, I want to take at least 4 speakers today. But we will come back to the debate tomorrow. If you have a point of order, come to the delegate desk so that they can check that it's a valid point of order against the standing orders. In the meantime, I will take 4 speakers, 1 from each section. And so I'll do it like this. So in the section to my left, I will take the speaker, the delegate, that is waving with the hand. That doesn't help, right? Exactly. That delegate, no, behind you, sir. Yes, you, madam. Yes, you, delegate. No, with the black, I think it's a black cardigan. Can you come to the front this way? Yes, she's walking. No, she's walking. Keep coming. Yes, she's moving. No, delegate is moving with the orange paper. In this section, I will take the delegate in this way. I will take the delegate here in the front. I am now moving to this section. And in this section, I will take the delegate in the yellow cardigan in this section. In the far section, I need to stand up for this one. On my far right, I will take the delegate in black. Yes.
Just make sure the right people come to the delegate desk. I think you've got possibly too many people coming down.
So that should have been 4 delegates. All other delegates, we will continue this debate tomorrow. We will not go anywhere. This is too important for us not to debate it. But today, we are taking 4 speakers. So if you can come forward, delegates, 4 people. Thank you. Now, can I just check? Was that a valid point of order? No. Okay. Go forward.
Keep them really tightly to 2 minutes so we end it the way.
You've got 2 minutes.
Yes. Naz Shah, Member of Parliament, Bradford West. Can I first send my thoughts and prayers to those affected by the earthquake in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan this morning. Conference, I stand here today to ask you to support the emergency motion on Kashmir. Over 70 years have passed. UN resolutions denied. Self-determination sidelined. Tens of thousands murdered. Political activists tortured. The honour of women forcefully robbed through rape. And now the Indian government has revoked Article 370 and placed a siege on the people of Kashmir. 2 months have passed with a complete lockdown on the region. There is no communication with the outside world. 700,000 Indian military personnel are placed on guard in the most militarised region in the world. Barbed wires are covering the city. Political leaders are under house arrest. And there are some reports of the most horrific human rights abuses with midnight raids, torture, rape and murder. The path to genocide in Kashmir is opening up and the world remains silent. Comrades, when working people needed a voice, this party was founded to be that voice. When women in Parliament were an exception, it was our party that fought for real representation. When apartheid in Africa was condoned by some, it was our party leader that protested against fascism and racism. When the world fails to recognise Palestine, it will be a Jeremy Corbyn government that will turn the tide and legitimise the Palestinian voice on day one. Today, as a Kashmiri, I ask my party, I ask my comrades, I ask you, Conference, will you pass this motion and stand with me and the people of Kashmir in the face of tyranny, oppression and genocide?
Okay.
The railroads of history are filled with regret of silence. Genocides came and went, and the world remains silent. Conference, let this not happen again. Pass this motion and stand with us.
Comrades, I speak today in support of Composite 23 housing, but it also overlaps with the homelessness and with the local authority cuts. I want to tell you a story about Charlene. Charlene gave me a phone call to say, I'm going to be evicted tomorrow. Section 21, she'd done nothing wrong. I don't like the no-fault evictions. I don't think anybody should be evicted at all. There is some reason why people get evicted. She was had a 3-year-old and heavily pregnant, and she had nowhere to go. The landlord said she'd made the home damp herself. She had not. The landlord lived abroad, didn't care. I couldn't even get hold of him. It was an agent that I had to deal with. And basically, she was chucked out of a house. 3-year-old, heavily pregnant in the 21st century, which is absolutely disgusting. She ended up at the town hall door. She ended up in a B&B that had got rats in it, drugs in it, absolutely disgusting Dickensian conditions. I intervened and we set up a meeting and we've got a house now. It's not a council house, it's a warm house. I visit her regularly. But we did that against the background of having to get the Executive for Children's Services and housing all together and to say we've all overspent our budgets, so it doesn't matter, just make sure she's housed. We cannot continue like this. We must build housing like we did in 1945. We must reverse the cuts. We have to get rid of the Conservative government. I'm not sure if the conference is happening. But if it is next week in Manchester, make sure you're there to get rid of these elitists. They are so out of control and out of touch with ordinary people. We have to protect them. If we do it, nobody can. Thank you, conference.
Conference. Knees Act are here to speak on the motion on Kashmir. But firstly, if you have not heard before, and you may have listened to some of my sisters before me, the earthquake that has hit Azad Jammu Kashmir is an area that my family, my loved ones live in. I am lucky that I was able to contact them. I am lucky that I am here to be able to speak on those that have not had their voices heard. So first and foremost, please share with me our thoughts and prayers to all those that are affected by this recent earthquake. Conference, I am a proud British Kashmiri woman. I am a proud Unite member, and most of all, I am humbled and proud to be standing here in front of you to talk about what is a very, very serious issue that is taking place in front of our eyes right here, right now. In the early 60s, my parents moved here to the UK, making Keighley, West Yorkshire their home, along with many thousands of other Kashmiris. Since the end of the British colonial rule, please conference, there is a theme that is running along this international debate. Jammu Kashmir has been divided into two, and 7 decades plus later, it remains the world's most heavily militarized region and one of the world's longest-running conflicts. On 5th of August, the Indian government, led by Narendra Modi, the Indian Trump, unilaterally revoked the special status of Jammu Kashmir. Seizing control, the Indian Army imposed a blanket communication blackout on 8 million people. Conference, irrespective of individual views on the sovereignty of Jammu Kashmir, we as a Labour movement can never ignore the harrowing accounts of human rights abuses being documented by the UN and many other organisations. I salute those in India who bravely oppose their government's actions. Our movement has a proud record of defending human rights and suffering across the world, wherever people live. We must not be silent on Kashmir. We must put pressure on the Modi government to end the state of emergency. 8 million Kashmiris need us now. Please, conference, support this motion and let us get their voices heard. Freedom for Kashmir.
Our final speaker in this debate for today. We'll be back.
Okay. Hello, conference. Karen Wire, Tatton, CLP, second-time delegate, first-time speaker. Firstly, I'd like to thank all the first-time speakers who have inspired me and given me the courage to speak. I definitely wouldn't be speaking here now if it were the first day of conference. It could be you, or it could be you. And I'm not talking about the lottery. I mean being made homeless. Look at me. I work full-time, yet I am one wage away from losing my home. The Housing Association like to remind me of this every month through letters, home phone calls and mobile text. Your rent account is unacceptable, Mrs. Wire, and the homeless team have been advised. How did this start? Having been a tenant of 15 years, basically in 2017, 9 months off work, sick, waiting for 2 major operations, I got into arrears. My children cleared them. I returned to work and having used my savings to keep my home, an empty bank account. No savings, nothing to fall back on, just my minimum wage. I definitely live to work, but my home is my castle and my sanctuary. Every one of those people sleeping rough that we walk past has a story. Commonly, mental health issues, debt and addictions. That could be me if I lose my home, because I fight depression every day and addiction, 2 years sober in December. So these keys mean everything to me. The people sleeping on our streets at some point had keys to their home, and we should never forget that. I know I don't. We have to be their voice, and we need a Jeremy Corbyn government. Conference, please support Composite 19.
Conference, thank you so much. That concludes the debate for today, but we have one final item of business. Please remain in your seats. In a little while, we'll be hearing from our leader, our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you.
Comrades, thank you so much for having me here today. At the age of 11, I met a man with integrity, a man with principle, and a man with a passion to improve people's lives. A man who, when I told him I wanted to do more in politics, I wanted to tackle injustices and inequality, I wanted to ensure young people can reach their full potential, I wanted to make the world a better place, he said to me, join the Labour Party, and I did. This man, as a young singer myself, gave me opportunities to perform in front of audiences. He developed my confidence. He would call me in the morning, we would discuss what song I would sing, and then he would then base his speech around the song I'll be singing. And it was a real great double act we used to do. And when it came to performing, he would have the most amazing introduction for me. Well, now it's my turn to return the favor. I hear people shouting out, Jermaine, sing, Jermaine, sing. So, one of the songs that he would always ask me to sing is this. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Thank you. Thank you. And in order for that change to come, we need a Labour government led by the People's Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. But first, let's remember what happened 4 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Jeremy Corbyn, 251,000. This morning, Conservatives on 48% of the vote, Labour on half. We, the media, the pundits, the experts, no.
Probably the biggest campaign growth since polling began.
And in that election, we will commit to unleash the biggest people-powered campaign we've ever seen in this country and in this movement.
Go fire on, catch a fade you, I'm wrong, I'm gone. Y'all can catch the wave that I am on, I am icon. Y'all are wide wrong, think that I'm a reconcilable, so ain't nothing to it though. This is on me, ain't got much to do with who you know. Keeping it true to form 10 L's into a milli though, but they already knew that those for well to your opinions.
We achieve all of these things by being a party and a movement totally and absolutely united to our common cause and purpose.
I'ma show you who I am unbreakable. And I think you understand. Watch me escape the law. The world is in my hands, I am unbreakable. I'ma show you who I am.
Comrades, the leader of the Labour Party and the future Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Conference, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. This is an extraordinary and precarious moment in our country's history. The Prime Minister has been found to have acted illegally when he tried to shut down Parliament. The highest court in the land has found that Boris Johnson broke the law when he tried to shut down democratic debate and accountability at a crucial moment for our public life. The Prime Minister acted illegally when he tried to shut down opposition to his reckless and disastrous plan to crash out of the European Union without a deal. But he has failed. He will never shut down our democracy or silence the voices of us, the people. The democracy that Boris Johnson describes as a rigmarole will not be stifled, and the people will have their say. Tomorrow, Parliament will return. The government will be held to account for what it has done. Boris Johnson has been found to have misled the country. This unelected Prime Minister should now resign. That would make him the shortest-serving British Prime Minister in history, and rightly so. His is a born-to-rule government of the entitled, who believe that the rules they set for everyone else don't apply to them. That's what today's Supreme Court judgment spells out with brutal clarity. There was no reason, and I quote, let alone a good reason, the judges concluded, for the Prime Minister to have shut down Parliament. Conference, he thought he could do whatever he liked, just as he has always done all his life. He thinks he's above us all. He's part of an elite that disdains democracy. I tell you this, I don't think he's fit to be Prime Minister. Let me quote the Supreme Court's decision, conclusion. I quote, unlawful, null, and of no effect, and should be quashed. They've got the Prime Minister down to a T. This crisis can only be settled with a general election. That election needs to take place as soon as this government's threat of a disastrous no deal is taken off the table. That condition is what MPs passed into law before Boris Johnson illegally closed down our Parliament. It's a protection that's clearly essential. After what has taken place, no one can trust this government and this Prime Minister not to use this crisis of their own making to drive our country over a no-deal cliff edge in 5 weeks' time. The Prime Minister has no mandate for a no-deal crash-out, which is opposed by the majority of the people of this country. It would force up food prices, cause shortages of medicines, and threaten peace in Northern Ireland, thus destroying the great work of the Good Friday Agreement. The battle over no deal is not a struggle between those who want to leave the EU and those who want to remain. It's about a small right-wing group who are trying to hijack the referendum result, to rip up our rights and protections and shift even more power and wealth to those at the top. Under the cover of no deal, they want to sell off of what remains of our public services, strip away the regulations that keep us safe, while slashing corporate taxes even further. That would lead to a race to the bottom in standards and workers' rights and create an offshore tax haven for the super rich. And they want all of this locked in with a one-sided free trade deal that will put our country at the mercy of Donald Trump. That's why a no-deal Brexit is in reality a Trump-deal Brexit. That would be the opposite of taking back control. It would be handing our country's future to the US President and his America First policy. Of course, Trump is delighted to have a compliant British Prime Minister in his back pocket. A Trump-deal Brexit would mean US corporations getting the green light for a comprehensive takeover of our public services. I am not prepared to stand by while our National Health Service is sacrificed on the altar of US big business or any other country's big business. Our NHS is not for sale. In the coming general election, Labour will be the only major UK party ready to put our trust in the people to have the final say on Brexit. We need to get Brexit sorted and do it in a way that doesn't leave our economy or our democracy broken. The Tories want to crash out without a deal, and the Liberal Democrats want to cancel the country's largest ever democratic vote with a parliamentary stitch-up. Labour will end the Brexit crisis by taking the decision back to the people with a choice of credible leave alongside remain. That's not complicated. Labour is a democratic party that trusts the people. After 3.5 years of Tory Brexit failure and division, the only way we can settle this issue is to bring people back together, is by taking the decision out of the hands of politicians and letting the people decide. So, within 3 months of coming to office, a Labour government will secure a sensible deal based on the terms we've long advocated and discussed with the European Union, trade unions, businesses and different European governments. A new customs union, a close single market relationship and a guarantee of rights and protections. Within 6 months of being elected, we'll put that deal to a public vote alongside Remain. And as a Labour Prime Minister, I pledge to carry out whatever the people decide. Only a vote for Labour will deliver a public vote on Brexit. Only a Labour government will put the power back in the hands of the people. We can bring our country and our people together, which is what I'm trying to do all the time. Let's stop a no-deal Brexit and let the people decide. We must get Brexit settled, not least because it's dominated our politics for far too long. The coming election will be a once-in-a-generation chance for real change, a chance to kick out Boris Johnson's government of the privileged few and put wealth and power in the hands of the many. A chance to give our National Health Service, our schools, our police, our public services the money they need by asking those at the top to pay their fair share. A chance to take urgent action on the environment before it's too late for our children. And thanks to those wonderful young people that spoke to conference this morning and gave us a lesson in what environmentalism is about. And a chance to end the Brexit crisis by letting the people, not the politicians, have the final say. In a shameless bid to turn reality on its head, Boris Johnson's born-to-rule Tories are now claiming to be the voice of the people. I know it's hard, but bear with me. A political party that exists to protect the establishment is pretending to be anti-establishment. Johnson and his wealthy friends are not only on the side of the establishment, they are the establishment. They will never be on the side of the people when supporting the people might hit them and their super-rich sponsors where it hurts, in their wallets and in their offshore bank accounts. So let me send this message to Boris Johnson. If you still lead your party into an election, we know your campaign will be absolutely swimming in cash. But we've got something you haven't. People. In their hundreds of thousands. Rooted in all our communities, all our age groups, all our diversity, all across this country. And we will meet you head-on with the biggest people-powered campaign this country has ever seen. If we win, it will be the people who win. Labour stands for real change in Britain. Real change after years of Conservative cuts and failure. We will rebuild and transform our country so that no one is held back and no community left behind. As you may be aware, we live in a country where the top chief executives now pocket in just 2.5 days what an average worker earns in a whole year. In other words, by January the 3rd, the top chief executives have earned what the average worker will not get until the 31st of December. How can you call that fair or equal or just in a modern society? Where Thomas Cook bosses were able to fill their pockets with unearned bonuses while their workers face redundancy and 150,000 holidaymakers are stranded because of their failure. We've had the greatest slump in wages, actually, since steam trains were built. It's a long time ago. To share wealth, we need to share power, and that's what we'll do in government, with bold, radical measures, such as giving the workforce 10% stake in large companies, paying a dividend of up to $500 a year to every employee. And we will bring about the biggest extension of rights for workers our country has ever seen. We will scrap 0 hours contracts. Introduce a £10 living wage, including for young people from the age of 16. Give all workers equal rights from the first day in their new job. And take action on the gender, disability and ethnicity pay gaps. And introduce flexible working time for workers experiencing the menopause. It's Labour that will get more money into your pocket rather than line the pockets of the multimillionaires. And we will give people a democratic voice at work, allowing them to secure better terms and pay for themselves. So, within the first 100 days of our government, we will scrap the Tory Trade Union Act. By the way, Labour will never, ever tell people they have to work until they're 75. We simply will not do it. A Labour government will mean better wages, greater security and more say, putting power in the hands of people. And we will bring rail, mail, water and the national grid into public ownership. So the essential services that we all rely on are run by and for the public, not for private profit. It's quite simple. That's what we're going to do. Yesterday, here in Brighton, I met Lewis Walker, a wonderful 9-year-old boy. Bright, bubbly, lovely boy. Lewis is living with cystic fibrosis. Every day, he needs 4 hours of treatment and is often in hospital, which obviously keeps him from school and from his friends, the normal lives of a 9-year-old. Lewis's life could be very different with the aid of a medicine called Orkambi. But Lewis is denied the medicine he needs because its manufacturer refuses to sell the drug to the NHS at an affordable price. Lewis and tens of thousands of others suffering from illnesses such as cystic fibrosis, hepatitis C, or breast cancer are being denied life-saving medicines by a system that puts profits for shareholders before people's lives. Labour will tackle this. We will redesign the system to serve public health, not private wealth, using compulsory licensing to secure generic versions of patented medicines. We'll tell the drug companies that if they want public research funding, then they'll have to make their drugs affordable for all. And we will create a new, publicly owned, generic drugs manufacturer to supply cheaper medicines to our NHS, saving our health service money and saving lives at the same time. I just say thank you to Lewis and his family and so many other families going through the same level of stress, which despite all of that, they find the time and the energy to campaign for others. Thank you, Lewis, and thank you to your family. We are the party, the Labour Party, that created the National Health Service. Only Labour can be trusted with its future. My parents' generation, that wonderful post-war generation, fought hard to establish the principle of a universal health service owned and run by the public. They left it in our trust. It's our duty to defend it. We will end the sell-offs and privatisation. Our NHS is not for sale, not to Trump or anybody else. It's our NHS for our people. And conference, we will make prescriptions free in England, as they've been in Wales since 2007, when charges were abolished. And I say thank you to Mark Drakeford and the Welsh Labour government for the abolition of those prescription charges in Wales. But we need to talk about social care as well. When older people who have paid into the system all their lives needed little help, we shouldn't deny it to them. We really shouldn't. It's wrong. So we will introduce free personal care for those who need it as the first step in our plan for a national care service. Because I believe government should provide a platform that allows everyone to reach their full potential. That's the principle behind the National Education Service that the next Labour government will create. Free education for everyone as a right throughout life, not a privilege. So, no more university tuition fees. Free childcare and a new great Sure Start programme. So that all children get help when they need it. Free vocational and technical education and free training for adults. And when it comes to paying for our public services, Labour will raise tax, but only for the top 5%. The Tories will cut taxes for the highest paid. Labour will make the big corporations pay the tax they owe. The Tories will give them tax breaks. How can it be right that the largest companies and the wealthiest individuals are being given tax cuts, whilst at the other end, mums and dads are missing meals so they can feed their kids. Shouldn't it be a source of shame to our country that the United Nations, yes, the United Nations, had to take our government to task this year over the shocking fact that 14 million people are living in poverty in ours, the 5th richest country in the world. So let me quote directly from the UN report. It said, and I quote, "Much of the glue that has held British society together since the Second World War has been deliberately removed and replaced with a harsh and uncaring ethos." Doesn't that sum up the Tories? Harsh and uncaring ethos in the 5th richest country in the world. Labour will stand up for tenants, for underpaid workers, and for all those struggling to make ends meet. We will start the largest council house building programme in a generation. Because Labour puts people before privilege. So we will end austerity and help rebuild your community. We'll restore local pride, revive the high streets that are the centres of our community. You know, those high streets dominated by closed shops, by graffitied roller blinds, a couple of payday loan shops, and that's about it. Destruction of the centres of our communities, the place where people come together to socialise, to meet and feel part of a community. Destroyed by austerity and destroyed by underfunding of local government. So it's our job to reverse those cuts. Because all those cuts added together have caused violent crime to double and caused underachievement to increase. It's our job as the Labour Party to get our economy working in every town, every city and every region of this country with record investment, a blitz on the problems of this country and the investment we need, and will boost the devolved budgets in Wales and Scotland as well. And we will upgrade our transport, energy and broadband infrastructure with 250 billion of investment and breathe new life into every community with a further 250 billion of capital for businesses and cooperatives. Investment on a scale our country has never known, bringing good new jobs and fresh growth to every area where you live in this country. That's the scale of Labour's ambition. No more tinkering around the edges. Because these aren't abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. They stand for an economic transformation that will change your daily life. Let me give you a concrete example of what it will mean. Labour will invest in Crossrail for the north to link our great northern cities. From Liverpool to Hull and to Newcastle in the northeast. And we'll restore the bus services that have been cut all over the country. Leaving people isolated from their communities. Better trains, a proper bus service. That's what Labour will bring. For decades, we've all been told the economy is beyond our control. It's an irresistible force that can lay waste to entire communities while we can only watch on as passive spectators to the disaster before our very eyes. But you know what? It's not true. With a serious industrial strategy and a radical Labour government, the economy can be a tool in our hands rather than the master of our fate. And with a government that's prepared to intervene, we can prioritise the things that matter most, which is precisely what our times demand, because nothing matters more than the climate emergency. That means taking on the big polluters and the wealth hoarders who profit from the current system. Bringing our emissions down to net zero won't happen by itself. It will only be possible with massive public investment in renewable energy and green technology. That's not a burden, it's an opportunity to kickstart a green industrial revolution. And that green industrial revolution will create hundreds of thousands of high-skill, high-wage, unionised jobs as we triple solar power, double onshore wind, and bring about a 7-fold increase in offshore wind projects. That's why we announced today that the next Labour government will build 3 new battery plants in South Wales, in Stoke-on-Trent, and in Swindon. The climate and environmental emergency we all face is an issue of global security. We're seeing ice caps melting, coral reefs dissolving, wildfires in the Arctic Circle, and Brazil's right-wing President Bolsonaro fiddles while the Amazon rainforest burns. Real security doesn't come from belligerent posturing or reckless military interventions. It comes from international cooperation and diplomacy and addressing the root causes of the threats that we all face. Our foreign policy, our international strategy will be defined by our commitment to human rights and international justice, not enthusiasm for foreign wars that fuel rather than combat terrorism and insecurity. So it really does beg a belief that this week Boris Johnson is openly talking about sending troops to Saudi Arabia as part of the increasingly very dangerous confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran in an apparent bid to appease Donald Trump. Have we learned nothing? Time and again over the last 2 decades, the British political and military establishments have made the wrong call on military intervention in the Middle East, spreading conflicts rather than settling them. We must not make those mistakes again. Under a Labour government, Britain will be a force, a pressure for peace and for international justice. Dangerous and wrong-headed international interventions have also exacerbated the community tensions at home. When Boris Johnson compared Muslim women to letterboxes or bank robbers, it wasn't a flippant comment, it was calculated to play on people's fears, as Tandisai pointed out in Parliament. Displays of racism, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism are not a sign of strength, but a sign of weakness. This Conservative government, as well as the far right, has fuelled division in our society. They'll blame people's problems on the migrant worker trying to make a better life. They'll blame it on the mother who's struggling on universal credit. They'll blame it on young Muslims, on young people, or anyone but themselves and their backers who benefit from a grossly unequal and rigged system. That is what Tories do. Labour do the opposite. We will bring people together. A Labour government will transform our economies and our communities. We stand not just for the 52% or the 48%, but we stand for the 99%. The Labour government I lead will take on those who really run our country, the financial speculators, tax dodgers and big polluters, so the real wealth creators, the people of this country, can have the jobs, the services and the futures they deserve. When Labour wins, the nurse wins. The pensioner wins, the student wins, the office worker wins, the engineers win. We all win. The politics we stand for is about giving people who don't have a lot of money and don't have friends in high places the chance to take control of their own lives. My job as leader and our job as the Labour Party is to champion those people, to stand up for those communities and deliver the real change our country needs. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, every one of them, all the members of our party, our elected representatives, our trade unions for making our party such a strong and welcoming place in every community and in every part of our country. I want also to say thank you to my community in Islington North in London, who teach me so much every day as their local MP. You know what? You learn from people when you listen to them. And say thank you to all of my widest family for their support, their help, their advice, which is often freely given, and generously, and frequently. But I want to say thank you to all of them for their tolerance and forbearance and the intrusions they suffer from some of the media and the abuse that they suffer. And I also, in particular, want to say thank you to my wife, Laura Alvarez, for all that she taught us. I have what might be considered a different view of leadership from the one people are used to. Yeah, I do, I really do. I do believe that leaders should have strong principles that people can trust. But leaders must also listen and trust others to play their part. Do you know what? There are leaders in every community driving change. Many of them, and I know many such people, would never dream of calling themselves leaders, but they are. I'm thinking, for example, recently of a mother I met who campaigned on behalf of the residents in her block of flats to make the landlord remove the damp. She was a leader. She is a leader. And in their campaign, it empowered her, it empowered the whole community, and they realised, yes, they could achieve change by that strength together. I think of workers in fast food outlets organising amongst their colleagues, often working in terrible conditions, to demand a decent living wage. Those are leaders standing up in their community to try to improve conditions, safety, and bring about good for the whole community. So Labour is working with and supporting all of these campaigns, because our philosophy is to trust the people and give them the power to make change in every community and workplace, not hand more power to politicians. That's why, if the British people elect a Labour government in the coming election, I will be very proud to be your Prime Minister, because I will be, I promise you this, a very different kind of Prime Minister. Not there from a sense of born-to-rule entitlement, certainly, absolutely promise you this, certainly not there on a personal power trip. Shadow Cabinet would confirm that. That's because I want to put government on your side, to put power and wealth into your hands. There, because I believe government should work for you. And together, we can go beyond defending the gains made by previous generations. We stand on the shoulders of those that went before us, but we have to take it further. And it's time we started to build a country fit for the next generation. A country where young people don't fear the future, don't look forward with terror of what lies beyond school or college or university, or debt or mental health problems, but a country and a society where our young people can look forward to the future with confidence, with hope, and with the promise that the whole community is with them and supporting them on their life's journey. The tide is turning. The years of retreat and defeat are coming to an end. Together, we can take on the privilege and put people into power. Conference, the Labour Party and our movement, thank you for all you do. Thank you for the campaigning you do. Go forward to win an election for the people of this country.
flag in Jerusalem.
The people's flag is deepest red, it's shrouded of our martyred dead, and ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their heart's blood dyed its every fold. Then raised the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Cowards flinch, traitors steer, we keep the red flag flying here. With its uncovered to bear it onwards till we fall. Come guns or gallows grim, this song shall be our parting hymn. Then raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Cowards flinch, traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And did the